right, so 4 o'clock. I will hope this is an exciting conversation on the implementing cybersecurity programs for multinational corporations. To introduce a little bit about myself, I am a global consultant with Siemens Plant Security Services. This was a group started about 5 years ago to bring the expertise of Siemens in automation and combine it with IT security. I created this presentation with my colleague Vladimir Vilkov, and together we have almost 30 years of experience working in industrial control systems. I'm originally from the nuclear background and working on nuclear instrumentation and controls. An overview of the presentation. I'll first introduce some of the characteristics of multinational corporations and go through the major phases of a cybersecurity program, and then into the implementation and rollout, maintenance and monitoring phase. And at the end, I have found 2 reference examples to go through. So multinational corporations are interesting creatures. The concept that security ends at the border is not the case here. They can have a lot of facilities, over 1,000 is not unheard of, and spread around the globe. They have country-specific regulations to follow, also cultural and language barriers. They all have a global headquarters somewhere, and each of the regional organizations have localized operating procedures. So the way a facility is run in China will always be different than how it's run in India. Even the number of employees at a same facility will be different depending on the regional location, and of course the automation vendor that is preferred will be different. And here we have the pillars of an effective ICS security program. On the foundation is the CIA triad, which is inverted. Availability is the most important here because not only is your bread and butter on the other end of those machines, but you don't want to have a safety incident because of an IT issue on your industrial PC. Integrity is almost equally as important, and confidentiality is coming in last because it's not so straightforward to get intellectual property out of control logic. That's easier done from engineering documents on the corporate network. And of the pillars, people, processes, and technology are what form your cybersecurity program. There's a challenge right now to find people that are skilled in both industrial controls and IT security. The typical person has experience in only one of those fields. And of course, the human factor is the weakest link. So establishing cybersecurity awareness for all plant personnel is a must-do. And to mitigate your risks, you have processes and you have technology. It's important to establish processes and leverage checklists that really address the underlying security goals and not to create time killers. And to select and configure your technology so that availability is not affected. Again, you don't want your plant losing production because of a security issue. And in multinational corporations, all good things start at the top. So to have a successful cybersecurity program, the initiative needs to come from the board level. They need to see an importance in establishing a security culture and also identify someone on the C-level that will have to manage this and report back. Another reason it's important to start at the top, I'm sure we've all seen examples where there has been local implementation of security in a facility, and then there will be shifts in personnel, shifts in structure, and that ends up being a monument to someone's good intentions. It doesn't scale, it doesn't translate across the corporation. Typically, it can be a CIO, a CISO. I'm also seeing a lot of digitalization on the C-level, head of digitalization handling security now. Someone needs to be responsible and also to take care of some items like budget, implementing the security culture, and creating the KPIs. From the global headquarters is where you'll develop the strategy and also indicate the roles and responsibilities to be implemented on the regional level. This is where a solution partner comes in and helps to develop the strategies. Typically, a manufacturing company expertise is in manufacturing, so a consulting company can come in to help develop the strategy and also to leverage for support later on during implementation. Starting early can help to avoid surprises and delays later. These are the typical phases of the cybersecurity program. The asset identification and risk assessment that's in the IEC 62443 standard. It may seem straightforward that a company would know what is in its facilities, what hardware is in there, what software, what it's doing, but that information is not always readily available. And again, there needs to be a security culture established from the management. You can spend a lot of time identifying risk, but if management isn't on board, it's going to go into a box somewhere. I'll talk more about the guideline and policy development later, and of course, the awareness training and the rollout and implementation, and the governance and follow-up auditing. Security is not static. You need to look again at your processes and tools, that they're still effective in addressing the risk landscape. And yeah, a monitoring center can be a good way to handle that, and just to keep in mind the life cycle of your plant when you're establishing the program. These are the major elements of a cybersecurity program, and in industrial facilities, they're far behind IT and corporate IT. So even so we all know they're using a lot of default passwords. Sundown operating systems are there. And even in more advanced secured facilities that have a more advanced security concept with things like next generation firewall with deep packet inspection or IDS or IPS systems, it's pretty common that you see that they haven't been configured properly. And this is because they haven't considered good KPI targets. So when implementing these features, somebody has spent money and invested in some good security tools, but they haven't put in the KPIs and the monitoring to make sure that they're actually useful. And of course, that's put some time in developing good security templates and compliance check sheets that this can be easily monitored and addressed. Project management can be a challenge with rolling out such a large project. Implementing cybersecurity around the globe, and I'll talk a bit more about that. Here's an example of how this can be done. So once you've implemented your strategy, you want to develop some core teams, and you can have 4, 5, 6. If you're dealing with the globe, 4, I would say, is a minimum. And this is taking into account cultural variations, time zones, geographic location, and again, also the automation vendor of choice will be different in these areas. This is the core competency of those core teams that you will need, and I want to highlight here, you don't just need IT competency and industry experience as you would expect. You also need a localized project management on board, and people with site commissioning experience. You want vendor support at this stage, and that could also be coming from a solution partner, because you don't want people making changes to your control system that are not familiar with the control system. Here's just a highlight of the way the interaction between the global headquarters and the regional teams is working. So the global headquarters is creating the strategy. They're there for support. They're there to provide manpower, assign roles, and the regional team is reporting back to them according to the concept that the headquarters has rolled out. This is an example of how complicated it can be to manage invoicing with a multinational corporation. You have a decision in the headquarters that you want to implement security at your regional facility. And so how to manage the invoice process that you have the support that you need on time when you're implementing during your outage. All right, and here you've already successfully rolled out your program and you're into the maintenance and monitoring phase. And you have, again, your pillars, people, processes, and technology. The threat landscape is always changing, so that has to be a part of the program that you develop. How are you going to address that? You need to have periodic review of the risks, the policies, and the security tools that you're using. Maybe there's some improvements that need to be made. Yes, so now that I've gone through the basic phases of implementing cybersecurity in a multinational corporation, I'd like to go into the two reference examples. The first reference example that I was able to talk about publicly is one that's close to home. This is Siemens. They are a large multinational corporation. We have 400 manufacturing facilities around the globe and around 300,000 employees. A few years ago, Siemens took a long look at cybersecurity and how to address the concerns. In the end, we've come up with the holistic security concept, which has been integrated into all systems, products, solutions, and services. These are the main levers that the holistic security concept addresses. So, and how are we going to handle security incidents? How are we going to implement and improve our processes? What security features need to be implemented? How to enhance awareness among all employees? And of course, upgrades to the IT infrastructure. The key criteria for this holistic security concept is based on both IEC 62443 and ISO 27001. We've combined the security level and the maturity level into a protection level. Yes, so the holistic security concept has been integrated into the development and manufacturing facilities. This has increased the level of security of our products. And here I just have an example of the protection levels and the increase in security. A protection level 1, if you're only requiring that as your target, then for the example of physical access, you would only need a lock on the door. As you go higher, maybe you need a card reader for unique identification of who's accessing the facility when. To the highest level where you have multi-factor authentication and yeah. The second example I have is Linde Gas. They're an air separation company. The air separation market is interesting because there's really only 4 companies that are handling this segment. Linde has about 800 facilities spread around the globe and also some remote operation centers. They have successfully, starting from the top, adopted the culture, developed the processes and the strategy to implement at all these facilities. I believe they finished this year, implementation. And the way that they handled this to address such a large number of facilities without having to perform a risk assessment at every single facility was to develop some templates of standard architecture and address it that way. So different facilities tended to follow this type of security architecture, and then they were able to perform their risk assessment and policy development for each of these templates of the plans. And so I believe I'm finishing a little early, and if you have any questions, there's a disclaimer there. Thank you.
Thank you. It took me by surprise. So I'm sure there will be a number of questions. Just bring out my clicker from my kangaroo pocket. Let's see. Yeah, we start with this one. What is an example of an ICS-specific security KPI, would you say?
Well, a common example looking at removable media. Do you mean ICS-specific, how that's something that you wouldn't use in IT? Yeah.
Maybe that was hard to... Okay, we take the next one. Still, the sectors that are most advanced in security are also the most regulated. Any thoughts to accelerate in less regulated industries? So if you think about, I mean, for instance, power supply, that is really, telecom industry is really regulated.
Well, one of the big drivers I see coming up is the Industry 4.0 and the IoT revolution. Companies are jumping on board with this because they're seeing all of the advancements they can make in manufacturing with big data, using the big data, and they're putting security into that jump because, of course, once they're putting things into a cloud, they're concerned about security.
Mm-hmm. So should we expect more regulation, do you think, even in the areas that are not regulated today? What is your feeling?
I think if the companies adopt early, then the regulators won't get involved. But if there's a lot of more incidents like was happening last year with or this year with the ransomware, regulators will start to.
Yeah, because they don't like incidents. Has Stuxnet affected the way Siemens deals with security flaws?
Well, you know, it's kind of coincidental that the initiative of this whole holistic security concept started around the same time Stuxnet came out. So yes, they've made a huge program in response.
So was that the starting point, the Stuxnet event? Yeah, okay. So that would be it. And thank you very much. We would like to express our gratitude for your participation. That is just